We are thrilled to be here. This is Diversify, your graduate lead gen, a session that was born out of some work we're doing in the areas of search and just focus on graduate and lead sources and just how to be successful in the world that we're living in today. So we really appreciate you coming to share this content with us. So if I haven't met you on the road, my name's Jamie Oleksic. I am VP of Business Development here at Carnegie. I've been here for 8 years this year, which is wild to think about. Previously worked at UMBC in specifically their international recruitment and reside in the Philadelphia region. So not too far from you, but I call Boston my second home. I'm up there quite a bit and thrilled to be with you all today. And I'll kick it over to my co-presenter, Brett.
Hi, everybody. If you don't know me already, which would be surprising in itself, my name is Brett DiMarzo. I'm the Director of Graduate Enrollment Digital Strategy at Boston College. I've been in the graduate enrollment, admissions, and financial aid space for about 20 years now, believe it or not. I'm a Boston native and a current resident of Burlington, Massachusetts. So anybody from Massachusetts or the New England area who's familiar, it's just kind of right outside of Boston, about 10-12 minutes outside of the downtown Boston area. And I'm a Disney geek. If you know, those of you who don't know me, I'm a big Disney geek. I used to work for the company for a little while in the retail side of things, but just happy to be part of this and joining Jamie for the conversation.
Yeah, part of the resources we can send after our Disney resources, right, Brad? We'll include those in
exactly.
the Diversify Your Legion
Yep.
resources. So like I said, just quick logistics. We'll try to keep this to 45 to 50 minutes for some Q&A. If you do have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Brad's going to be kind of looking at that throughout, but we're also tackle a number of them at the end. We will send this after with the slides and the recording, and then a survey just to get a sense of if this was helpful. So thank you so much. So just to kind of recenter ourselves, the landscape has changed, right? Specifically with graduate recruitment, right? We have seen major shifts with COVID-19 in the world of college fair attendance, the type of sources that we can lean into, the competitiveness of the different channels that were used to recruit students. A lot of that has changed over the last couple of years and has created an environment where we need to kind of rethink our approach to what I would kind of call graduate search or graduate lead gen. So what we're hoping from today is you'll get kind of some higher level thinking of where we think strategy is going in the world of graduate lead gen, some things to kind of keep in mind for the upcoming year, and then also some really tactical low-hanging fruit of things you can implement right away and start thinking about right away with the sources that you're already leveraging and thinking about and using. So really hoping this is a twofold support system for you. We'll jump into the higher ed landscape real quickly. I'll go over that briefly since we're all living it every day, but I think it helps kind of set the stage of where our minds are with a lot of this content. We're going to dive deeply into the website. We feel strongly that the website is your #1 recruitment tool, and there are some really quick and easy optimizations that can help in the world of lead gen with your website. We'll talk about some digital channels, and then we'll also talk about the sources outside of a digital and your website. Are there college fairs, associations, search platforms? What do those look like, and how can you optimize those for your recruitment? And then, of course, questions and answers at the end. All right, so jumping into the higher ed landscape, and in order to really paint the picture, I'm actually going to take us out of the higher ed industry into the video industry. For those of you that are also millennials and grew up living in Blockbuster in the 90s, you remember that experience, right? For me, it was always the wild carpet and the smell of popcorn, but there is just a number of things that was wild and unique about that Blockbuster experience. What is fascinating to me is that with Blockbuster, they were incredibly successful because they controlled your entire experience. They controlled the type of content you engaged with. They controlled what you saw first, so the order that you saw the content that you could purchase and rent. They controlled how often you came back to the store. Was it a 1-week rental? Was it a 2-day rental? And they also controlled the experience that you had. So were you watching a movie? Were you watching it? Is it a video game? What does that look like? So with them, their goal was really just to get you in the door. The more people in the door, the more they could predict what those conversions were for all of the media that they were selling. Think about how you engage with that same content today, right? Today, we are downloading Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max. We're watching half of one show and then an entire season of another. We are completely in the driver's seat of our experience with this content. And so the industry itself recognized that, saw that coming, and shifted entirely to a world of personalization, authenticity, creating an experience that feeds off of all of the information that we're giving that industry, and created a better place for us to engage. That's what we're seeing happen with higher education, right? We were once reliant on more of that funnel model. This is probably more pertinent to our undergrad colleagues, but we're seeing it now with grad as well. And now we're really being thrust into this world of that prospective graduate student, that adult learner is completely in the driver's seat. I'd argue that grad has been facing this for far longer than the undergrad industry. So we're almost at the point where we're more so experts in this than our undergrad colleagues. And it's continuing to evolve and become more pertinent across the entire higher ed landscape. And so we'll talk through that a little bit. So based on this shift, we're now living in what we're kind of calling the attention economy, a shift where consumers, prospective students, they're deciding how, when, and where to engage. And the way that we respond is the way that we can drive action and engagement. What's fascinating is that we're not only competing with our peers and our colleagues, we're competing with this, right? We're competing with the noise. And I always say this, and I know this is something that is hard to swallow for a lot of us as enrollment marketers, is that digital marketing and really all the tactics that we're going to talk about today does not impact enrollment. Digital marketing and these channels impact engagement. Engagement is what impacts enrollment. If you can engage with students at the right time with the right message, that's where you're going to start to build that rapport and that relationship to where they're willing to make the decision to invest the time, the money, all of that into their degree. So one thing that we want to keep in mind through all of these recommendations and through all the things we're going to talk through is just the shift in our audience. So Gen Z is now officially aging into that grad audience. I think the elder Gen Zers are 26, 27 at this point, with Gen Alpha kind of at their heels, entering into the high school era. What's fascinating about this generation is obviously they grew up in a very different world, but they are in a population that almost expects us to personalize their experience. And we have some specific examples of this throughout. If they're giving information through a lead form, if they're providing information through any engagement that they're doing, they almost expect you to digest that information and respond in a way that's personalized to them, right? These students, these adults are not purchasing a pair of shoes at the store. They're designing shoes and colors and styles and logos and names themselves for it to be their own specific product. They also are the most savvy in terms of sniffing out brand authenticity. And this goes beyond just consistency of message and dives deeply into what does your brand stand for? And are you practicing what you preach once that person converts and the experience that they're having? So they put a lot of weight into that actual experience and that brand authenticity specifically. And so the way that we think about this shift from the funnel mentality is in this world of ecosystem. And with an ecosystem, you have all of these different channels that a prospective graduate student and adult learner is engaging with to get to you on their own time. They're in the driver's seat. And so our biggest recommendation, if you take nothing else from this entire presentation, is to think about all of the ports of entry into your ecosystem. So all of the ways someone can engage, inquire, apply, and ensure that for each of those channels and ports that you have a message that's specific to your prospective students, that's specific to and relevant for that channel, and a metric. What's success in that channel? Is it really an awareness play? Are you just trying to get in front of students? Or is it something where you're trying to generate leads? Are you to get an efficient cost per lead? Each one is going to be a little bit different, and they all work in different ways, very specifically. So when we're thinking about this shift in landscape and how things are changing and continuing to evolve, and in my opinion, move more towards the environment that we've been working in the grad adult landscape for a long time, these are kind of the buckets that we think will move towards success in the world of this new era. So thinking about reaching the students that are going to be most successful at your institution, thinking about how to differentiate yourself amongst the noise, having an always on approach. Again, if the prospective student is in the driver's seat, then you want to be present and relevant in the moment that they have that idea, that spark, and that interest in your institution. And then that last one there is leveraging your CRM. These tools are smarter than ever. So how can we lean into those? What we're going to focus on most heavily today is this fourth recommendation, which is diversifying your sources, not limiting yourself to A, kind of what you've always done, always lean into, but B, having one or two sources, really diversifying the types of channels that you're leveraging and leaning into. I will not walk through this line by line. This is more so a resource for you all when you get the slides, but we just wanted to identify some of the landscape changes that we've seen and really high level synopsis of the strategies to start thinking about to address those landscape changes. Obviously, some of these are still far enough out to where laying the groundwork now is going to be a really powerful move. Things like the demographic cliff, that's going to hit grad a little bit later. Things like thinking about even Gen Z and Gen Alpha and their behaviors, but all are super relevant to just the shift in that landscape in higher ed. All right, so jumping into the website again, the website being the most powerful recruitment tool of all of your tools. When we ask prospective students what's most helpful in their college search, more than half of them are saying the website is what is most helpful. So in reality, especially as we're thinking about more hybrid programs, more online programs, we know many of these students are using the website to find the majority of the information before even reaching out and connecting with any of your counselors, teams, deans, whoever it may be. They're doing a lot of that stealth, quote unquote, research themselves. And so what this means is that the website is almost building that relationship with that student before we get them to take action. And so it becomes even more critical from that perspective. But the fact that more than half of prospective students are saying that's what's been most helpful in their process says a lot of how they're using that as a resource.
And Jamie, if I could just add, I think
I also feel very strongly, and I've said this a number of times, I'm sorry if you all have heard this already, I see 2023 and 2024 as the year of website and SEO. When we're hearing more and more about AI and artificial intelligence and the way that content's being crawled to provide easy answers, the solution to that is making sure that the website is technically savvy and sound, as well as your content is easily read and understood and authentic. And we'll talk through some of the ways to achieve that as well. So why do we think the website is the most important recruitment tool? Yes, the website's important. There's a lot of stealth research happening there, but why do we care that it's used as a recruitment or a lead generation tool? The answer to that is that website inquiry is probably the most valuable inquiry that you can generate, even outside of name purchases, outside of social lead gen ads, outside of all of the other sources. If someone is seeking you out, getting to your website, and submitting their information while they're on their site, you know a couple of things. You know that that student has a really high intent. They know what they're doing. They didn't have any fat fingers or anything like that. They were seeking you out actively and got to your page. You also know that they inquired while also knowing truly what your program was or what your institution is about, because they came to your site where you're controlling all of that narrative. So they're digesting that and still inquiring, which is so, so valuable. Additionally, you own all of that data. So if you're using any types of tools on your website to track behavior or to provide any personalization, you're able to see really specifically what they engaged with before and after they filled out that inquiry form. So really, really incredibly valuable. What's a challenge is that we generally see with our websites in higher ed that they're not always built with recruitment in mind as the #1 goal, right? Our websites are large and tedious. They serve a lot of audiences. Many of them probably haven't been redesigned in a number of years. And so the way that the site is structured or the format or the architecture might not be built with just the prospective student lens in mind. And we see that based on some of the survey work that we have done with graduate students. So we ask students, what's most important to you when you're looking for college information, specifically for graduate programs? Not a surprise that things like costs and scholarships, financial aid were #1, timelines, information on how to apply. These are all answers that we would expect to hear. But then we asked, what do you frequently have trouble finding on the site? And we saw a lot of similar answers. So things like information on cost, 51% have trouble finding that information on the website. Why is that? Well, it's because it's generally probably buried, right, under an architecture that makes sense to us as users and as staff at the institution, but might not make sense to somebody that's new to the process, coming back to school, whatever the case may be. We also asked, what's a piece of advice you would give to colleges and graduate schools based on their website and the experience that you had? And many of it revolved around navigation, easy to use. Format your website to be easy to navigate. Make information more easily accessible. Provide contact information for your staff. Ensure that your website is easy to use with clear and concise message. So you're seeing kind of a common theme, right? A common trend. These are students that, again, are being inundated with noise across multiple channels. They're being inundated with college-specific noise, both from a paid ad perspective, but also organically. And we are just really busy, right? We have a lot of things going on. Grad students, adult learners have life to compete with. Not that traditional undergrads don't, but it's a different experience, right? And so we have a millisecond to grab their attention or to lean into a spark that they had about a program. And with them running into hurdles on the site, it's causing some of that friction. And so one way to tackle this or think about this is through website personalization, which can be done a lot of ways. Some CMSs have personalization tools built in. You can lean into something like a CDP, which is a customer data platform. We have one at Carnegie called Clarity, but there are a lot of ways to personalize. But in summary, it's all about just stripping away the noise, taking in the information of, all right, this user came to our site 12 times. They haven't inquired. They visited these 2 grad program pages. They're obviously interested. When they come back to the site, let me clear the path and direct them directly to what I know they're interested in, application deadlines, connection opportunities with counselors, whatever that may be for that next step. And what's fascinating is that they almost expect this, thinking back to what we talked about with Gen Z and how they're designing their own products these days versus buying off the shelf. We almost expect that from our experience. So we had asked our graduate prospects, do you enjoy when web content's tailored? 58% yes. But what's fascinating is when we said, do you expect content to be personalized? 32% yes. So a third of prospective graduate students expect the website to be personalized because we're spoiled by Netflix, by Amazon, by all of these sites that are doing this to cater to our experience regularly. So these are just some examples of ways you can personalize. You can personalize a homepage based on program pages that a prospective student visits, and making sure that you're driving them to that content, showing imagery that's related to that program, again, capturing their attention, paving the way for that student. You can do things like light boxes and toasters. They all have funny names, to drive them to action. I know you've seen these on sites that you've probably explored. These are all things that, again, can make us make a really complex site easier to use without redesigning the entire site. So it's a great way to leverage what you already have. And personalization can be based on a lot of things. What you've interacted with from a campaign perspective, your behavior on the website, interest, a program of interest. So if you have someone that has inquired for a specific program and then they don't do anything after that, you can then start to show them specific information and events related to that program to re-engage with them with really specific asks, where they are in their student journey, what that looks like. You can do demo information. So if you have a nursing program that serves two different nursing programs, one that serves adult learners or career changers, and one that serves that more traditional graduate student, you can serve them different content, different personalized content to showcase what their experience is going to be like, since it's probably going to be very different for those two different audiences. And then, of course, the world of personas. So identifying what makes my students tick, how can I communicate with them, and then target them differently. The other thing when it comes to the website that is so critical is the area of search engine optimization, which I'm sure many of you have used or explored, but it's something that is just constantly changing and evolving. And really put simply, it's a way to be found in Google. What's awesome and fascinating about SEO is that what was once an opportunity to be found as an organic listing in search in Google is now a whole experience. There are so many features within Google now that are heavily reliant on SEO that give you visibility that's both visually appealing, that takes up more real estate, that's more engaging in so many ways, that shows you as a true resource that's almost recommended by Google. There's just so many more opportunities in the world of SEO. And like I said, with AI, SEO is the secret to success, to be able to ride this wave of AI and the shifts that are happening there, because AI is just crawling your site and crawling your content. And so to have that thought about in an SEO perspective is really, really critical. So how do I do that? This is your how-to guide for SEO 101. Take a screenshot, save it. It's twofold. One is ensuring your content can be read by the crawls that go through your site. And so these are the main things that they'll hit, things like title tags, meta descriptions. You don't even have to know exactly what these are defined as. I guarantee your web team and members of your marketing team do, but just making sure everything is tagged and titled correctly so it's easy to understand and crawl. And then number two is just checking on the technical health of your site. And there is a tool, Google so nicely puts out a free tool for you to assess your site health on both mobile and desktop. It's linked here, but you can just Google page speed insights and it'll come right up for you. So these two will get you to a really solid place. There's obviously kind of a 201 level of SEO type work, but this is step one into just making sure that you're clean and clear and being found in the ways that you can be. The other thing that's really critical in the world of your website is your inquiry form. And form strategy, in my opinion, is something that we could present on for 2 hours. There is so much nuance and detail and politics to form strategy, right? There are certain elements that the admissions team needs. There are certain elements that the marketing team needs. There is so much that can happen by just changing the wording or removing a form field or changing the placement of your form, that if you aren't already having conversations around what your form strategy is and why, that's absolutely step one. And that'll put you leaps and bounds in front of a number of institutions, quite honestly. The value of form strategy is that we already talked about how difficult it is to get everybody to your site. If you have a strong form strategy, you're going to convert more than any other institution, because if you can get them there, they're able to easily fill out an information form and they're getting the content that they need. That is the perfect recipe for lead generation through your site and leveraging your site to its full capability. So these are just some of the things to think about in your form strategy. Where does it live on your page? Does it look the same on mobile as it does on desktop? Am I able to fill it out on any device pretty easily? What's the length of the form? Which for this one, I have two pieces of advice. One, the sweet spot based on some of the peers we've read about research they've done on form strategy is 4 to 7 fields. Any more than that, conversion goes down. Less than that, conversion rate goes up, but then you're impacting quality, very likely. 4 to 7 is the sweet spot. The other piece of advice is just to ask yourself, am I using every piece of information I'm asking for? If you're asking for all the previous institutions they've attended, how are you using that information? If you're asking for a phone number, are you calling them right away, or does that not happen until later? Ensure that whatever form fields you have in there, that you're using that information in kind of your next step. Otherwise, it's hindering you for no reason. So really thinking about that. And then finally, for the thank you page on your inquiry form, what does that content look like? That is hands down your most viewed piece of content and your most engaged audience. They just got to your site, they loved what they saw, they filled out a form. What are you then saying to them next? If the only thing you're saying is, we'll reach out to you soon, it's a missed opportunity to engage with them further. So that is a little summary of kind of how to leverage your website for lead generation. We talked about web personalization, SEO, form strategy. Obviously, your content strategy is so critical. I'd love to kick it over to you, Brett, if you have any insights you want to share just from your experience at BC. I know you all are doing a lot of work specifically in form strategy and your website, how that has been thought about in the area of lead generation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of, I think, kind of what all of the schools are looking at now. So at BC, there's 8 graduate and professional schools. And actually, we're kind of at the point where almost all of them, I think we're on the last school right now, is going through kind of a website refresh. And so a lot of these areas, they're all and have been thinking about over the last year. I think for us, it's kind of taking all of these pieces in steps, because it's a lot to try to do all at once. So we're trying to take a systematic approach of how can we make sure that we are looking at SEO and maximizing that to the best of its ability. The personalization piece, how can we make sure and utilize different tools to make that easier and more effective. For us right now, I think the content strategy and the form strategy are actually the 2 biggest pieces. A lot of the teams are looking at the forms that they're utilizing and what types of questions that they're asking. And to your point, Jamie, really making sure, okay, are we asking this because we just are trying to collect this information, or are we actually, to your point, using it, and what is a next step, whether it's follow-up or phone calls or whatever the case may be. If we're collecting mailing address, are we actually sending them something in the mail, or are we just collecting that because that's what we've traditionally done? So it's all really important. And the statistic and kind of the research and studies and articles that I've been reading a lot recently that all go back to this is the fact that, to an earlier slide that you had, so many students, particularly at the graduate level, are doing a lot of their research on their own, right? So there's so many students that our admission teams are finding are doing that first interaction in our Slate system by filling out an application. So we're assuming that they're doing all of their research online, they're going to our website, they're finding out this information and doing what they need to kind of get the basics down to put us on their short list of schools they want to apply to. So that just makes the website that much more crucial. And so all of these pieces are tools and tactics that we really need to pay attention to and make sure that we're addressing. So it's happening in steps here at BC, as you know, all of you who particularly, you know, whether you're a larger institution or a smaller institution, you know, all of this takes time, and you have to work with a lot of partners at your institution to be able to do all of these things. You know, it's okay to take it in chunks. We know, I know for sure, working at both a larger institution and a smaller institution in my career, that you don't do all this in one day. So really kind of leveraging your relationships and your partnerships with the other departments on your campus to kind of look at each of these areas and make sure you're doing as much as possible for each of these.
I love that, Brett. Yeah, you all were in such a prime position of, you knew you were going to be updating the website. And so it was almost like you were taking the learnings of each variation of the site and how the form has succeeded or hasn't, and make those changes. And I felt like you were constantly iterating on what had worked well, which is so smart to do. So if you all are going into a web redesign or any type of web update, thinking about form strategy as part of that is so valuable. Awesome. So we are going to pivot into digital for lead generation. And I love digital marketing. I talk about it so much. I think it's just so valuable to be where the students are. And it really comes down to being part of the conversation. Back to what I had said, where digital marketing does not impact enrollment. You are not going to get enrolled students from digital. You're going to get engagement. You're going to get conversation. You're going to get connection. And that's really where you're going to get those students that rise to the top of wanting to be successful at your institution. And so digital channels is where it's going to be. We're faced with the challenge of there's a lot of them now. I think back even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, especially pre-COVID, if we leaned heavily into Facebook and Instagram, maybe a little bit of LinkedIn, we were pretty covered. Leads were flowing in. You had a good volume coming in. The targeting was there. And now what we're finding is not only are there more channels coming to play, but the other ones have not died off. So we've just increased the number of channels that we're using on a daily basis. So that noise level has gone up. The number of channels has gone up. The type of content needs on our poor content creators has gone up. And so it just makes it more challenging to navigate. And so with all of this, identifying the channels to put focus into and strategy behind is probably critical step number one. And there are a lot of ways to think about that. One thing that I will say that has been a common trend, and I've seen this both with undergrad, grad, and we haven't specifically surveyed adult learners, but I would venture to guess they'd fall into this category as well. We've seen a huge reliance and dedication to video content, whether it's through YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat. We're constantly using video to paint the picture of the experience we're going to have, to paint the picture of the true authentic voice of an institution. It's a really valuable asset to have in play. So when we ask prospective graduate students, are they using YouTube? 44% say that they specifically use YouTube as part of their college search. They're going in there, they're searching for content, and they're engaging with that content. In another study that we had done to look at where are we spending dollars as higher ed marketers, only 21% of institutions say they use it consistently. And that's pretty flat when we did this report in 2020. So what this is telling me is that students are continuing to increase the amount they're using YouTube and other video channels. We have not increased our investment in those channels, in that production of that type of content for a lot of reasons, right? It's a big lift. It's content that is difficult to continuously update. It requires a lot of voices. There's a lot of reasons video is challenging, but there's so much opportunity in the video space because students are so hungry for it. And the one thing I will say, if you are in a position where bandwidth is tight, you aren't able to create all of these new wonderful video assets, you aren't alone. Step number one is to just audit what's out there. Or what do you have that's already existing on your channel that's tagged into your institution? What do you have out there that's created by other creators that talks about your institution? What does that look like? What's the narrative that's happening in YouTube in general? Getting a grasp on what that even looks like is going to put you ahead of the game in terms of understanding things that you might have to combat, or stories that you weren't aware of that maybe you could lean into as part of your website, and leverage some of that content. So some tips in the world of lead generation when it comes to social media specifically, is to lean into things like in-platform lead gen. There's a time and place for this, right? If you just did kind of a broad in-platform lead gen campaign in Facebook with very limited parameters, you're going to get a ton of names and convert a very small percentage of them. This strategy can work in some ways, and in other ways it doesn't. There are a lot of ways to be really smart about in-platform lead gen, based on who you're targeting, at what stage in their student journey you're targeting them, what's the message, what's the ask, how many form fields. So it's a really powerful strategy. There's a lot of thought to think about with it. Program specific forms. So again, catering it to that program specific audience. Obviously in the grad world, that's students, they are searching because of a program or an area that they're interested in. This is different obviously than undergrad. And so lean into that with some of that messaging and value proposition. We have generally found that form fields with date of birth and asking about your previous institution generally will hinder conversion rates. People are a little more wary to give that information, whether it's that they're sensitive to what their current age is, or they just don't feel comfortable giving it because of data privacy. And then also for fear of being judged or reviewed based on where they attended, how long ago that was. These are things that students can be sensitive to. So just try to avoid those unless you absolutely need it for your communication. And then of course the thank you page again here, so critical to stay in front of students. Google is also a channel that we cannot forget. It's obviously the most critical search engine out there for prospective students. We spend 7 hours a day apparently on Google in all of our searches. And it's the #2 resource prospective graduate students are using after the website. So valuable, so important. What's also special about Google search is that most students, when they start using this tool, they don't know where they want to go. So one of the things that Brett and I were talking about a little bit is just the world of kind of list purchasing in the graduate space, and how, especially in the world of GMAT, GRE, a lot of those students kind of already know their shortlist when they're taking that test and kind of have a mindset of where they want to go. Google is one of those places where you're reaching them early enough to where they're still creating that list. So there's opportunity to move the needle there. And the students continuously are telling us that. So 64% of prospective graduate students roughly knew the area of study, had no idea what school they wanted to attend. Only 5% knew the school and not the area of study. And 18% knew the program and the school roughly that they wanted to attend. So the vast majority of prospective graduate students are still very exploratory when they're leveraging Google. And there's a lot of levers we can pull from a paid media perspective, a marketing perspective. You can bid on different keywords, different types of keywords, geographies, age range. You can bid on based on where they were on your website. So there's a lot of opportunities and levers to be really efficient in the area of Google search. My one recommendation is just to ensure that you're collaborating across different areas of campus that are also in paid search. This is the channel where it is easiest to bid against yourself and rise your costs specifically. So 2 recommendations that I have that have worked well for some other grad peers. One is to lean into a ad format that's called remarketing list for search ads, which is a fancy way of just saying retargeting for search. So it would capture any of those students that have come to your website, they then went to Google and they searched on your keywords. You can show them a different ad than someone that's going for the first time into Google search. So you can nurture that warm lead before they've actually inquired, which is so valuable. The other thing is targeting feeder schools, feeder organizations that feed into your program. I think one of the challenges with search is that if you target based on a DMA, you can spend a lot of money really quickly and not efficiently. So really honing in on actual radii around your feeder organizations is such a targeted, smart way to get in front of those prospects. And then, of course, turning prospects into leads. So if you do have those lists, there are a lot of beautiful ways to target them, whether it's through things like IP targeting, which serves display ads over the home Wi-Fi and everyone in that home, or if it's list-based social on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, you can reach all of these users with specific messaging based on that list. So what I always recommend in the grad space is to identify a list that has a pretty hardy volume to it, because if your list is less than 100 or even only a couple hundred, you're not going to be successful in these channels. So whether if it's a purchase list or an inquiry list, what list do I have some volume to, and ones that would benefit from a specific message based on what we know about that list? Are they from a certain market? Is it a certain program? Are they eligible for a certain type of scholarship or financial aid package? What is that succinct message that you could then target that list with? So lead gen in the world of digital is so critical. We talked a little bit about social and IP, PPC being so valuable, but really it's about building that pipeline in the channels where the conversation is happening. And Brett, would love to hear what you have to add. I know what's really fascinating about your role is that you support a number of areas within BC. So I feel like you've done such a great job of managing each individual area, but also identifying trends across the campus itself to just ensure success across all the different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, my role is a
Oh,
new
I think you
role.
might. Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah. So my role is a new role that was created at BC, and as part of the graduate enrollment team out of the provost office, I get the honor of being able to work across all of our 8 graduate and professional schools in terms of looking at, what are those opportunities that we have in the digital marketing space and the digital tools that are available to use across all of these different disciplines. So, a lot of the things that Jamie has been talking about is what each of our teams has kind of explored. And what is really valuable is because I am able to kind of be in each of these individual conversations and see what this team is doing and what type of tool this is using. Maybe one team is utilizing paid search really heavily and doing something on 1 or 2 of the social media platforms, and found different varying levels of success or some challenges, and be able to kind of bring that perspective to all of the teams. So it's been really great. And the one piece that I think resonates across all of the teams that I think is a really important aspect to be aware of at your own institution is that the value that we've really found is the more channels that we potentially can use, the more opportunities we have to reach different audiences, to have flexibility to kind of adjust depending on what we're seeing from a performance perspective. Maybe one campaign in this channel isn't working well. Well, we can kind of adjust and maybe allocate some of the resources from that area to use in a different tool or a different tactic. So that, it's really about kind of making that multi-channeled approach as wide and as expansive as possible. Obviously, knowing everybody's budget is different, and you may wish you had a little bit more budget or a little bit more resources to kind of use overall. That's the kind of value and the real advantage of kind of having a multi-channeled approach and strategy. And we've been able to kind of really take advantage of that. And that's the beauty of kind of what my role gets to do, is to look at that, to analyze it, and see kind of what types of suggestions and opportunities that I can provide to each of the different teams.
Yeah, no, it's been great with that collaboration across campus. I think just everybody is kind of learning and collaborating in that way. So our last section is around additional data sources, and that we kind of referenced these a little bit at the beginning, in that there's still those really valuable tried and true sources that we've leaned into over the years of different professional groups, obviously college fairs that we attend, and the network that comes from those, list purchases. These are all still incredibly valuable pieces to the puzzle and diversifying our lead generation. And it's shifted a little bit. I don't know, Brett, if you want to talk a little bit in terms of the grad space and what you've seen, just again, being at both a small and a large institution, and some of those channels that have just evolved over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing that we've seen at the graduate level is obviously the pandemic shifted a lot of things. And I think one of the biggest ways that it shifted things at the graduate level is kind of what we've seen from a kind of event standpoint, right? Graduate school fairs and going to different events and conferences, obviously that was put on hold during the pandemic. But even before then, I think a lot of us who had been doing this for a while had kind of seen the writing on the wall that, what we had particularly seen in traditional graduate school fairs, they were changing, and we weren't seeing the return on going to those types of events as we kind of maybe saw 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so I think what that has led to is a real need to be able to look at where can we find these additional data sources. So I think that for me, across the schools that I've been at over my career, each year it's been exploring what some of these new sources are. So, college search platforms, test purchase lists. If you're lucky enough, obviously, to be in certain and have programs in certain disciplines, there's a wealth of professional associations, professional conferences that you could potentially connect with people who are looking for education in those areas. So I think there's been a need to really look at how can we expand our kind of traditional view of going grad school fairs, getting names, meeting students that way. And there is, we have the benefit at the graduate level of having a kind of a wider variety of those sources than I think maybe our undergraduate colleagues can kind of don't have as many opportunities that we do.
Yeah, that's spot on. And one of the things that we noticed when Brett and I were talking about this is that with a lot of these search platforms and sources where your institution gets to be promoted or placed or talked about, there's a lot of similarities and ways to optimize those. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk through, is the benefit of those and how to optimize them. Here at Carnegie, we have our own called College Express, but it's one of a number that work to diversify those sources and bring in those qualified leads. And it goes back to just this world of when students begin their search, they don't know where they want to attend. We talked about this a little bit with Google search. And so it's a great way to get in front of them in a new format. And provides a lot of benefits, right? It's a low pressure experience for those students. They're already using these resources either to find out about new schools or to engage with other students or to find resources and scholarships and financial aid. It is looked at as kind of a trusted, unbiased resource. Again, this generation is sniffing out authenticity in everywhere they turn. And so to have you represented in a true, authentic way in sources other than your website just drives that point home and creates that rapport with that student. There are a lot of options for students as they're going through and discovering schools, so they're not limited to, just a short list or selective institutions. They're able to see the breadth of options available, which is helpful. It's free to students, of course, that's valuable. And accessibility is such a big critical piece of it. Students are going to find different types of resources helpful in their search for a number of reasons. And so having a presence in these different areas helps with that accessibility to students that are leaning into different tools. So the value of this for graduate schools and programs is that you have students that are opting in. It's a really valuable in-market lead generation type of platform and channel. Again, the credibility of that objective party, access to more students than you would have access to just through direct contact on your website. And again, leans back into that always on approach that we teased kind of at the beginning. It's you have a presence 24/7, 365 for whenever that student's ready to have that engagement. So just to kind of break these down a little bit, the educated opt-in, so valuable. That prospective student is the one making that first move. So with all of these types of sources, the student has to be the one that raises their hand. So what's really cool about this is not only are you getting someone that has actively said, yep, I'm interested, but because of the power of the CRMs and the tools that we're using, you're able to then see direct ROI for all of these different sources. You can tag these leads coming in from source A compared to source B. What does that look like? What's the type of leads that we're getting? It's very, very measurable and a great way to channel your prospective students to the right place. Again, that credibility is so valuable. Students want to trust us, but they just need repeat of messaging. They need to see consistency in what they're engaging with. And so having that third party resource creates that, again, that objective validation for that prospective student, which is so valuable. Access, so important. Students can access these free resources, engage with schools in different ways, get access to quick information. This, in my opinion, this is why Wikipedia has taken off in the way that it did. It's just easy access to information that for some reason we all lean into as truth, regardless of what's in there. But it's access to that true information that students are trying to get about institutions. And then always on and always accessible to prospective students, regardless of time of year. This is even more critical, as you all know, in the grad space, because you have multiple intakes, you have life changes that can happen any time of year. There's less of that quote unquote cyclical nature to things. So having that presence 24/7 is so critical. So what can you do to leverage some of these tools? A couple of things to think about, regardless of the tool that you're leveraging for your placement, is just taking advantage of every nook and cranny of the profiles that you have. A lot of them allow you to layer in video, header content, your logo, of course, updated programs. A lot of them have space for kind of news and updates, events coming up, new program formats that you're offering. Take advantage of all of that and make sure that it's maintained in a way that is relevant to the content you have on your site. Layer in those testimonials, those different program formats to really paint the picture of your institution. There's also a lot of opportunities for different types of targeting. So for College Express specifically, you have your profile, but then you also can leverage different ads based on who you're trying to target and get in front of. It's a great way to create a specific message for the different audiences that you're targeting. So take advantage of that. If you are really trying to increase your female inquiries and applicants, target them specifically with imagery about what their experience is going to look like, messaging that's going to resonate with those students, and speak to them specifically on what they're looking for. And then inbox advertising. So getting into their inbox, what we've found is we've all known this, that email is very noisy. We're getting a lot of emails day in, day out. If they're using different sources like College Express, some of these other search sources, that is going to be a different level of validity in their email inbox versus a cold email from an institution they have never visited or been to before. It's something that they're comfortable and familiar with and willing to engage with. And we see generally really great open rates and click-through rates with our emails based on that relationship built with those prospective students. So in summary, thinking about these different placements and tools and really taking full advantage of them as much as you possibly can to yield those hand raisers. I think this is a great opportunity to quickly diversify your sources. You might already be in some paid channels. You're certainly thinking about your website and maybe optimizing that experience. But looking at maybe some new sources that you haven't used before is a great way to just start new pipelines that maybe you haven't had exposure in before. So something to certainly consider. I don't know if there's anything you'd add there, Brett, based on your experiences.
Yeah, I think the only other additional piece, and I think the biggest example for me, and it's, any of you who work kind of with healthcare programs, I think it's the easiest example to showcase where, a lot of healthcare professions and healthcare programs have professional associations that are very, very active, not only for the professionals who are already in that field, but for potential students who want to get into that field. So I think that that's a great example of a lot of these features and benefits that Jamie was talking about, the inbox advertising, the profile, all of those pieces are what you can take advantage of through these professional associations. And so it's, again, it's just another way to diversify your data sources, to kind of connect with potential audiences and people who are looking for these. And it gives that great authenticity of being information that's found on a credible source, a professional association that is obviously dedicated to educating members of their field. So it's validating the fact that you are a partner in helping to provide that education to people in that field. So that's the biggest example that I think is very pertinent and related to kind of this type of, what you consider to be like a traditional college search platform.
Awesome. So you've all made it. Thank you for bearing with us. In summary, the landscape is changing, continuing to evolve. I think we're positioned really well as grad marketers to understand this audience better than even some of our undergrad colleagues that are just experiencing this type of shift for the first time. And so just continuing to keep our innovation hat on and think about the shifting tide of these students is so critical. Optimizing your website for conversion should be first and foremost the goal. Start the conversation about form strategy, start the conversation about SEO. Really think about what's the experience of my student when they get to our website. Are we making it easy for them to inquire? And if not, what are those hurdles? Thinking about lead gen in the digital landscape, there are really smart, savvy ways to spend efficiently in digital, even more so now than ever before. So what are those for your institution? What are the channels that make the most sense to be most successful? Look at those other sources, those college search platforms. There could be a bundle of qualified leads that you're not currently leveraging. That would be qualified hand raisers that maybe haven't heard of your institution before or thought about your institution in those ways. So create those pipelines. And then finally, and most importantly, just diversifying those sources and tracking the effectiveness of those sources. We didn't get into that deeply today, but with all of these different sources, ensuring that your CRM is set up in a way where you know which source the leads are coming from, even last touch, kind of at service level, and being able to track the ROI of those sources so that you can navigate your strategy annually. So with that, I will pause and see if I think there was a question that Brett had answered in the chat. I don't know if there's anything you want to expand on that one, Brett. It was around just approaching SEO with your team and tips for collaboration across campus.
Yeah. Laura had asked just, how, based on kind of my experience and obviously yours too, from the partner side, Jamie, how models and ways in which you can effectively collaborate with, other partners at your institution, particularly like technology web team partners, to handle and approach SEO. And, what I had indicated was, for me, it's really just about providing your colleagues who, may not necessarily work the same way we do with students to understand and put into context that what we're trying to do with SEO is really address what students are demanding. They're looking for specific information. They're looking for particular content that is helping them decide whether or not BC or whatever your school is the right place to go for them. And so I always start with that premise. This, when I'm working with the web team and IT, I'm always making sure that they understand that I'm approaching this as, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm just telling you what we're hearing and what the feedback is from the students that we're working with on the types of information that they're looking for, what they're excited and interested in engaging with on our website. And that's how we should frame how we can take these steps to make our website better and more useful for the student. So, it's kind of a simple way to approach it, but I've found that to be the most helpful in making it successful to work with the people that you need to work with. Because obviously I'm not an IT person, so I don't have the skills in order to look at navigation and structure, but I can give you what the motivation is from the students that we work with.
Yeah, the two things that I think are really helpful when we're cross collaborating in the world of SEO, especially if you're introducing this topic cross campus, is to lean into the data and what you know. And the two tools that are so critical is that page speed insights report. Like, where are we current day? Like, it's not something that you can mess with. It's true to whatever Google is reading on your site. And so it gives you that true data of the site health technically of your site. And the other one, I'm going to throw it in the chat here, is answerthepublic.com. This tool, if you use that tool and type in your school's name, your program name, it'll populate all of the most frequently asked questions in Google as related to that keyword. And so what you can do is then say, okay, these are the top 10 things that are being searched on with my brand. What comes up when you search for that? Is it the right page? Is it my content? Are we the answer to that question like we should be? And if not, then that's a content problem. And that's where you can start that content SEO strategy, where you can start to identify the pages and focus and put an action plan in place. So those two I found helpful, especially when dealing with those that are more technically savvy than me and think in that way, to have some of that data behind you. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Laura.
Well, I know we took you a little over. I apologize. Thank you for bearing with us all. We will send you this recording. You see our emails here on screen. Please feel free to reach out, but we appreciate everyone's time. And thank you, Brett, for joining us from NEGAP.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Go all on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.